Louisiana food is famous all over America, but most outsiders still get it wrong. They think it is just spicy food. They think Cajun and Creole mean the same thing. They think gumbo is one recipe, jambalaya is one recipe, and every dish in New Orleans must have been invented in a French Quarter restaurant. That is not Louisiana. Louisiana food is older, messier, and much more interesting. It is West African okra and rice, Choctaw filet, French roux, Spanish and Caribbean influence, Acadian survival cooking, German sausage making, Sicilian groceries, Gulf seafood, sugar, pecans, crawfish, Catholic calendars, and families who know exactly how their grandmother made it. Number 7 is tied to wash day. Number 5 was built inside a Sicilian grocery. Number 3 became famous from a cooking method more than a single recipe. And number 1 is so important that Louisiana made it the official state cuisine. These are 10 Louisiana foods outsiders always get wrong. Number 10. Pralines. The first mistake is the pronunciation. In much of New Orleans, you are more likely to hear something closer to praline than praline. But the bigger mistake is thinking a praline is just a piece of candy. A Louisiana praline is a small history lesson made from sugar. The older idea came from French confection traditions. In France, pralines were originally tied to almonds and cooked sugar. But New Orleans did what New Orleans has always done. It took an old-world idea and transformed it through local ingredients, local labor, and local taste. In Louisiana, pecans made more sense than almonds. Sugar made sense because of the region's cane fields. Cream or butter made the candy richer. And over time, the New Orleans praline became its own thing. A sweet, grainy, buttery, pecan-filled candy that can feel delicate for about 2 seconds before it becomes completely serious. Pralines also carry a history that is not always visible in the pretty shop window. For generations, black women vendors sold pralines on New Orleans streets, turning candy into income, entrepreneurship, and public food culture. Tourists might see a souvenir. Locals see something older. A city where cooking, selling, walking, calling out, and surviving were often connected. That is what outsiders miss. A praline is not just sugar and pecans. It is French influence changed by Louisiana pecans, cane sugar, black labor, street selling, and a sweet tooth that somehow became one of the city's edible signatures. It looks small, but in New Orleans, small sweets can carry a lot of history. Number 9. King cake. Outsiders often think king cake is just Mardi Gras birthday cake with colorful sugar. That is only the surface. King cake belongs to the carnival season, and its roots reach back to Epiphany, also called Twelfth Night, on January 6th. Older European customs used special cakes to mark the arrival of the Magi. French settlers brought versions of that tradition to Louisiana, where it eventually became tied to Mardi Gras season in a way that feels completely local. The Louisiana king cake most Americans recognize today is often ring-shaped, iced, and covered in purple, green, and gold sugar. Inside, there may be cinnamon, cream cheese, fruit filling, praline filling, or a dozen modern variations that would make an old baker blink. And then there is the baby. The tiny baby hidden with the cake is part of the ritual. Whoever finds it is often expected to bring the next king cake or host the next gathering. That is the part outsiders miss if they treat king cake as only dessert. It is a calendar. It tells people the carnival season has begun. It travels to offices, schools, family tables, break rooms, and parties. It creates a chain. One cake leads to another. One person finds the baby and suddenly, next week, has a plan. King cake is not Louisiana because Louisiana invented the entire idea from nothing. It is Louisiana because the state turned an old Epiphany custom into a season-long social machine. The cake is sweet. The ritual is the real engine.
Number 8. Boudin. Boudin is one of the easiest Louisiana foods to misunderstand because it does not behave like most sausages outsiders know. It is not a hot dog. It is not breakfast sausage. It is not only meat in a casing. Louisiana boudin is usually made with pork, rice, onions, peppers, seasonings, and often liver, all stuffed into a casing. It can be eaten from the link, squeezed onto crackers, rolled into boudin balls, fried, smoked, stuffed into bread, or turned into the kind of gas station lunch that makes outsiders realize they have been underestimating gas stations. The roots are layered. Older French and European boudin traditions existed before Louisiana. Acadian settlers brought foodways that adapted to South Louisiana. German sausage making helped shape the region's pork culture. Rice production became important in Louisiana, and rice made its way into the filling. Whole hog butchering made thrift and skill necessary. That is why boudin matters. It is not a luxury food pretending to be rustic. It is resourcefulness in a casing. The mistake outsiders make is expecting boudin to be neat. Louisiana boudin is often soft inside, almost spreadable. It is hot, seasoned, rice-heavy, porky, and built for immediate eating. You can find it in butcher shops, roadside stops, Cajun markets, festivals, and places where the best food might be sitting under a heat lamp near the register. Boudin built Louisiana food culture by refusing to separate survival from pleasure. It uses what is available. It wastes very little. And when it is good, it makes you understand why people will plan an entire drive around a link of sausage. Number 7. Red beans and rice. Red beans and rice look simple. That is why outsiders underestimate it. In New Orleans, red beans and rice is closely tied to Monday, and the old explanation is wash day. Monday was traditionally the day for laundry, and laundry was hard work before modern machines made it easy. A pot of beans could simmer slowly while the washing was being done. A ham bone or leftover pork from Sunday dinner could season the pot. Rice made it filling. That is the story people remember because it makes practical sense. The dish is also much deeper than one household routine. Beans and rice connect to Caribbean and West African foodways, to Louisiana rice, to Spanish and French colonial influence, to working kitchens, to thrift, and to the kind of cooking that rewards patience more than money. The best red beans are not rushed. They cook until creamy. They take seasoning from sausage, ham, pickled pork, tasso, or whatever the cook believes belongs there. They sit over rice and become something that is somehow both ordinary and sacred. Outsiders get red beans wrong when they treat them like a side dish. In Louisiana, red beans and rice can be the meal. It is a weekly rhythm. It is what a restaurant offers on Monday because Monday still remembers. It is what a family cooks because somebody before them cooked it that way. And it proves one of the most important truths in Louisiana food: the humble dishes are often the ones with the deepest roots. Number 6. Beignets and café au lait. Beignets are famous enough that tourists sometimes think they understand them before the powdered sugar even lands on their shirt. They do not. A beignet is often described as a square French-style donut, fried and covered with powdered sugar. In New Orleans, it is almost impossible to separate the beignet from coffee and chicory, café au lait, the French market, and the image of people sitting at a small table while powdered sugar turns the whole scene into a delicious mess. French Creole colonists brought beignet traditions to New Orleans in the 18th century. Café du Monde, the most famous beignet institution, opened in the French market in 1862 and built a menu around coffee, chicory, milk, and beignet that became one of the city's most recognizable food experiences. But beignets are not important only because they are old. They are important because they are public. They are breakfast, dessert, midnight snack, tourist ritual, local comfort, and proof that a food does not need complexity to become iconic. The dough is simple. The sugar is not subtle. The coffee cuts the sweetness. The whole thing works because New Orleans knows how to make a small pleasure feel like an event. The mistake outsiders make is thinking beignets are just donuts without holes. They are not. They are New Orleans cafe culture. They are powdered sugar on black pants. They are the sound of chairs scraping against tile, the smell of hot oil and coffee, and the strange confidence of a city that can make fried dough feel like a landmark. Number 5. Muffuletta. The muffuletta is the sandwich outsiders often misread because it does not look like a typical American sandwich. It is round. It is huge. It is built on a sesame loaf. And the most important part is not only the meat or the cheese. It is the olive salad. The muffuletta is closely tied to Central Grocery in New Orleans, founded in 1906 by Sicilian immigrant Salvatore Lupo. The classic story is that Sicilian workers and shoppers around the French market were buying bread, cured meats, cheese, and olives separately. Lupo put those ingredients together into one easier sandwich, using a round Sicilian-style loaf and a chopped olive salad that soaked flavor into everything. That is the New Orleans genius of the muffuletta. It is not just an Italian sandwich. It is a Sicilian New Orleans market sandwich. The city had a large Sicilian immigrant community, and their groceries, bakeries, docks, produced trade, and food habits changed the way New Orleans ate. The muffuletta carries that history in layers: salami, ham, mortadella, provolone, olive salad, oil, herbs, sesame bread. Outsiders get it wrong when they treat the muffuletta like a big cold-cut sandwich. The olive salad is what makes it speak. It is briny, oily, sharp, and generous. It turns the bread into part of the filling. It makes the sandwich better after it sits for a while, which is one reason people say muffuletta leftovers travel so well. The muffuletta built Louisiana food culture by showing that New Orleans was never only French and Creole. It was also Sicilian. And sometimes an entire immigrant neighborhood can be remembered in one sandwich big enough to share. Number 4. The po' boy. A po' boy is not just a sub sandwich with a Louisiana accent. That is the outsider mistake. A po' boy begins with the bread. New Orleans French bread is light, crisp, and airy in a way that changes the whole sandwich. It can hold fried shrimp, fried oysters, roast beef with brie gravy, hot sausage, catfish, soft-shell crab, or almost anything the shop believes deserves a place inside. Ask for it dressed, and you usually mean lettuce, tomato, pickles, and mayo. But the po' boy also has one of the great food origin stories in Louisiana. The widely told story goes back to 1929, during a New Orleans streetcar strike. Brothers Benny and Clovis Martin, former streetcar workers who ran a restaurant, fed striking workers with large sandwiches. When another hungry striker came in, the cry was supposedly, "Here comes another poor boy." The exact details live partly in history and partly in legend, but the connection between the sandwich and working-class New Orleans is the point. The po' boy is not fancy food dressed down. It is worker food that became city identity. A roast beef po' boy dripping gravy down your hand is not a clean experience. A fried shrimp po' boy is not trying to be dainty. The bread cracks, the filling shifts, the dressing matters, and the best versions make you stop talking for a minute. Outsiders get po' boys wrong when they treat them like tourist sandwiches. They are neighborhood food. They are corner store food. They are Friday lunch, parade food, post-game food, and the sandwich people crave when they move away. The po' boy built Louisiana by turning a loaf of bread into a local argument, a meal, and a memory. Number 3. Crawfish etouffee. Etouffee is one of those words outsiders often learn from a menu before they understand what it means. It comes from the French word for smothered. That matters because etouffee is not just a dish. It is a method. Crawfish tails are gently cooked in a seasoned sauce, often with a roux. The holy trinity of onion, bell pepper, and celery, stock, and enough care to make the crawfish taste like the whole point of the bowl. It is usually served over rice. Crawfish etouffee is closely tied to Cajun country, especially Breaux Bridge, which became known as the crawfish capital of the world. Breaux Bridge restaurants help bring crawfish openly onto menus, and local tradition connects the rise of crawfish etouffee to mid-20th century Cajun restaurant cooking. But like many Louisiana dishes, the origin story is carried through oral tradition, not one clean patent. That is why outsiders get etouffee wrong when they ask who invented it, as if the answer must be one person, one date, and one kitchen. Louisiana food does not always work that way. Sometimes the dish comes from a method, a season, a place, and a community that keeps cooking it until everyone knows what it is. Etouffee is not supposed to be a giant bowl of heat. It should taste rounded, rich, crawfish forward, and deeply seasoned. Spicy can be part of it, but spice is not the whole personality. The crawfish matter. The rice matters. The smothering matters. And the timing matters, because crawfish season in Louisiana is not only an ingredient cycle. It is a social season. Etouffee built Louisiana food culture by turning a small freshwater crustacean into something elegant enough for restaurants and familiar enough for home kitchens. Number 2. Jambalaya. Jambalaya is where outsiders start overconfident and get humbled fast. They think there is one correct version. There is not. Louisiana has Creole jambalaya and Cajun jambalaya, and the difference is not cosmetic. Creole versions, especially associated with New Orleans, often include tomatoes. Cajun versions, more associated with rural South Louisiana, often do not. That simple tomato question can become a regional identity test. But jambalaya is bigger than tomatoes. It is a rice dish built from cultural convergence. You can see connections to Spanish paella, West African rice traditions, French and Creole cooking, Cajun resourcefulness, smoked sausage, chicken, seafood, and the holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper. The dish makes sense in Louisiana because rice makes sense in Louisiana. So do big pots. So do gatherings. Jambalaya is food for feeding people. It can be cooked in a family kitchen, at a festival, for a fundraiser, for a tailgate, or in an enormous black pot where one person with a long paddle suddenly becomes very important. Outsiders get jambalaya wrong when they treat it as spicy rice with stuff in it. Good jambalaya is about balance. The rice has to absorb flavor without turning mushy. The seasoning has to carry through the pot. The meat and seafood have to make sense together. And the cook has to know when to stop stirring and let the rice do its work. Jambalaya built Louisiana by making complexity practical. It takes many influences and turns them into one pot. That is not a shortcut. That is the whole story of the state. Number 1. Gumbo. Gumbo is the dish outsiders most confidently misunderstand. They want to know the one real recipe. There is no one real recipe. They want to know whether tomatoes belong. The answer depends on where you are, who raised you, and how much fighting you want at the table. They want to know whether gumbo is Cajun or Creole. The answer is yes, and also no, because gumbo belongs to Louisiana's tangled history more than it belongs to one label. Gumbo is so central to the state that Louisiana made it the official state cuisine in 2004. But its roots are much older than that law. Gumbo developed through the meeting of peoples in Louisiana, West African okra stews, Choctaw file made from ground sassafras leaves, French roux, Spanish and Caribbean influences, local seafood, smoked meats, rice, and generations of cooks adapting what they had. Even the word gumbo points toward that mix. It is often linked to West African words for okra, while file points to Native American contribution. The pot itself is a record of contact, violence, adaptation, survival, and creativity. That is why gumbo cannot be reduced to spicy soup. It is not even just soup. It is a Louisiana argument in a bowl. Some gumbos are seafood. Some are chicken and sausage. Some are dark and smoky. Some are greener, like gumbo's Z-herbs. Some use okra. Some use file. Some are served with rice in the bowl. Some people put potato salad beside it, or even in it, and somewhere another person is already upset. That is gumbo. It is personal and communal at the same time. It can come from a restaurant, a home kitchen, a church hall, a hunting camp, a holiday table, or a pot big enough to feed half a neighborhood. Gumbo is number one because it explains Louisiana better than any single dish can. It shows why Cajun and Creole are not the same, but still connected. It shows how African, Native, European, Caribbean, and American foodways met in one place. It shows how a recipe can change from family to family and still remain itself. Most of all, Gumbo shows why outsiders get Louisiana wrong. They look for one answer. Louisiana gives them a pot. And if they are smart, they stop arguing long enough to taste it.